Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sleep On It, the podcast for sleeping your way to better health. I'm Naina.
I'm Ying Ying.
And I'm Komal.
Cole's back again.
Yay!
Woohoo!
Thanks for having me again, guys.
Yes. So we had such a great time talking about our previous episode together. You guys haven't listened to it. It's the All Nighters episode, and it's very apt because today we're going to talk about a very similar or related topic of naps. And the reason why we want to talk about naps today is because there's a lot of interesting chit chatter online about naps. You know, what's the best time to nap? Are naps good? The trend that happened a couple years ago about the coffee naps and how that's the best nap, and we can talk about that more too. But I thought we'll kick off the episode by talking about this Times article that came out in 1989, which seems so long ago, but we were just babies then. And it was probably one of the first major articles that came out that started trending about the idea about naps. And it was from these very prominent researchers that said that after doing a couple of studies, they believed that the human brain is wired to take naps. Because when they put people into a room that they didn't know what the time was and they gave them any time to sleep, they found that they would sleep a long period at night, but they also sleep for about maybe 1 to 2 hours between the time frame of 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. So they came out with this article in the Times, and it was this huge splash, and everyone was talking about how, oh, does that mean adults should start taking naps? What about people who are not getting enough sleep? Should we incorporate naps into the workplace, as a wellness initiative? It sprung this debate that I think we can all talk about, and especially love to hear you guys' thoughts. Is the brain wired to take naps? What do you guys think?
Well, I think that it is. And I think that Times article was sort of a great final media representation of the concept of naps and what it means. And I think that's great that it brought it up because what we do know from science is that essentially there is an optimal time that your bodies are going to want to fall asleep during the day and have a nap. And that does tend to occur in the early afternoon, probably around noon to 3, definitely before the late afternoon. And the reason is because as soon as you wake up in the morning, your body starts building up what we call a homeostatic drive or a sleep drive. And that drive builds up the longer that you stay awake. However, so the longer you stay awake, you start getting sleepy. So by 12, 1, 2 p.m. is when you're starting to feel that post-lunch food coma. And the truth is that even if you didn't have lunch, your body would still probably feel sleepy because of the homeostatic sleep drive. But there is another process called the circadian signal that starts kicking in late afternoon to evening, which is the alerting system. So that's why as it gets later through the evening, you're actually not as likely to feel sleepy unless you're totally sleep deprived. But if you've had a normal night's sleep, you're not likely to feel sleepy around 6, 7, 8, 9 p.m., which is what we call the wakefulness maintenance zone right before bed. That's because of your circadian system. So because of these two physiological processes, there's this opportunity for sleep that occurs in the early afternoon for some people between 12 and about 3 p.m.
Yeah, I feel like this whole podcast is coming full circle because we kicked off this podcast talking about circadian rhythm and now talking about sleep debt and needing to catch up on sleep, for example, if you pull an all-nighter. And then now it's this idea about, well, then naps, like how do people use it? What's the best way, or what are the pros and cons about taking a nap and educating people about that?
Yeah, just going back to the all-nighter episode, I said that if I take an all-nighter the day after, I'm inclined to take a nap, but I say nap in quotes because it's not less than 30 minutes for sure. It's hours. And I don't sleep to an alarm. I don't wake up to an alarm. I just let myself sleep until I wake up naturally so that I feel as refreshed as possible. So if there's a certain duration nap that could help with getting back that energy after an all-nighter, sign me up. I want to know what that is. But generally after pulling an all-nighter or having very little sleep the night before, I tend to just nap for hours. So
Well, that's a great segue because the question is how much time is the best time or signifies a nap? Nina, do you have like way to qualify that?
Yeah, I think that is a really good segue and a great question because I think that even anecdotally, just from experience, because this is something that I think everyone can relate to, is that some naps make us feel refreshed, whereas some naps tend to make us feel more groggy or feel even tired at the end of it. And sometimes you just kick yourself like, well, that wasn't worth it. That defeated the purpose. So I think that, there's a lot of research that has been going on studying sort of the timing of naps and what's the optimal sort of frequency of naps. And the general consensus is that less than 30 minutes is the optimal time to take a nap. And research has shown that when studying in groups of people that took either 10-minute nap, 20-minute naps, or greater than 30-minute naps, those that took greater than 30-minute naps had worse cognitive experience right after, meaning that they were a little bit more confused. They weren't alert as those that had naps of a lesser time period. And so also research has shown that naps greater than 30 minutes and naps that are 4 to 5 times a week or maybe multiple times a day, people who take those kind of naps have increased rates of mortality and cardiovascular events.
Oof, that escalated quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
don't normally think about it in terms of what's really happening in our body, but yeah, it can change the physiological processes. So I think the timing of naps is key. And why is it that shorter naps lead to sort of more alertness and quote, that's the sort of power nap I think that
The
people
sweet
refer
spot,
to?
yeah.
Yeah, and the reason is because when you're taking a shorter nap, you sort of are only getting a specific type of sleep. And that type of sleep is either very light sleep or what we call REM sleep. So it's easier to wake up out of those stages of sleep and feel more refreshed. However, when you take longer naps, those greater than 30 or 45 minutes, then you have a greater chance of getting slow wave sleep. And when you try to wake up out of slow wave sleep, it's much harder to feel refreshed and much harder to feel alert because your body just craves it. So I think when thinking of incorporating naps, it's probably best to think about a nap less than 30 minutes. But I will say one thing, the caveat is that, this is for people getting sort of, quote, a normal night of sleep of 7 to 8 hours, and they don't have other sleep disorders like obstructive sleep apnea that would cause them to feel fatigued and tired throughout the day, necessitating a nap.
It's so interesting that you talked about the 30-minute and the alertness because they did find that people who took 30-minute naps, they might make more mistakes at work, after waking up. And so that's where the popular trend of the coffee nap came about because they were saying how you drink a quick shot of espresso and then you take a nap until it reaches your GI tract. And then supposedly when you wake up, that's when the coffee kicks in and then you're able to be more alert and make less mistakes. Have you guys tried that or do you think that works? Or I guess scientifically it does work.
Yeah, actually, I, in fact, tend to recommend that to my patients, especially when counseling about drowsy driving. So, a lot of the times, believe it or not, drowsy driving is one of the biggest leading causes of motor vehicle accidents. And unfortunately, I do have a lot of patients that come and see me after having a motor vehicle accident in which they fell asleep at the wheel. So I often tend to counsel them on exactly that, which is, find a safe place to stop, get some caffeine, take a nap, and then by the time you wake up, the caffeine would have kicked in and you would have felt more alert to be driving in a safe way. So I do that, but I've personally never tried that before just because I feel like the coffee may be hitting me faster where as soon as I drink it, I don't know if it's like a psychological thing, but I do feel more alert as soon as I do take that first sip.
I've actually tried it before. When it first came out, I think, or when I first learned about it, I tried to take one, but I don't think I did it properly because I wasn't even able to fall asleep in the first place. So I don't think my sleep drive was high enough before. I think I was too excited about what the nap could do for me, and I didn't even I
Too
didn't even
excited
end
to
up
nap.
sleeping. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it didn't even happen. So that
I
was
mean,
kind of a bust, but.
Fair.
yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned that 1989 Times article is when, we first started even thinking about naps here in the US, whereas, for a century, naps is an ancient concept and it was first even brought up by the ancient Romans and even in ancient Islam where it's mentioned about naps and even in Ayurveda. So it's it's present in a lot of ancient cultures and the ancient Chinese culture too. And when we think about sort of naps, I mean, I can't help but think about siestas in Spain and how that came about and how that's one of the cultures that still widely accepts nap as a part of, their lifestyle. I think that may be changing, but what do you guys think of siestas? And in this quarantine workday, should we incorporate siestas here in the US?
Yeah, I was like reading this fact sheet, I guess, put out by Mayo Clinic. And basically, they said that they would recommend a nap especially if you're trying to schedule like naps into your daily routine. And that kind of just like ties back into siestas. And I think like the origin of siestas was to give farmers a time to rest, like during the peak heat and harsh sun rays of the day. So that comes around noon, right? The sixth hour or sexta hora, which is like the Latin etymology of siesta.
I love that you mentioned Asian countries too, because in China they still incorporate naps, and especially for students, because students are required to, and we touched on this briefly on our previous episode, where students are kind of expected to keep studying throughout the day. So in order to give them enough energy to study throughout the night, they take a 2 hour break in the middle of the day right after lunch. Most students live close enough to their homes where they can do that. They go home, eat a quick bite, and then they take a nap. Like it's expected for them to take an hour nap so they have enough energy to then keep studying. And so I love that. It's like, oh yeah, take care of yourselves and then get back right on that horse.
Well, yeah, I can't help but think of a quote. I mean, it's true. Naps are often have this stigma of being lazy or being counterproductive, or, they really do have a negative stigma, at least in the American culture, or like a weekend habit versus like a daily thing. And it's true. You probably, again, there's a big debate in the sleep community about sort of in the normal population what naps really mean. So I think, but generally, I think with the consensus of the research is to keep it less than 30 minutes at least once a day and make it sort of a timed planned event in your day versus sort of, long frequent naps every day. But I can't help but think of a quote from Winston Churchill that really counteracts this negative stigma of naps in our society. And he said, "You must sleep sometime between lunch and dinner, and no halfway measures. Take off your clothes and get into bed. That's what I always do. Don't think you will be doing less work because you sleep during the day. That's a foolish notion held by people who have no imaginations. You'll be able to accomplish much more. You get 2 days in one, well, at least 1.5." That really kind of stuck with me because as through my readings, because he has such a strong opinion about naps and it being positive. And obviously he was one of a very productive person, at least of what we know of him. So there we go.
Yeah, I love the idea that the culture is shifting to show that actually people who are most efficient and very, like you said, productive and have a lot of ambition, they actually take their sleep very seriously. They don't skimp on the sleep. I guess I also have a different perspective on this being in the Bay Area because with the startup culture, naps and nap rooms and wellness rooms are actually very common here. I don't know if it is in the East Coast. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this, but most places I've worked at and my friends have worked at, there's a designated room to take a nap. I mean, they don't call it the nap room, like, officially it's a wellness room, but everyone knows you go there because, there's blinds, blackout curtains, like, they know what the deal is. And I even remember one time seeing one of my colleagues go into the room and we thought he was like on a call because you can usually use those rooms for calls, but he was just sitting there on the couch with his eyes closed. And we're like, oh, is he napping? Oh, he's totally napping. That's so funny. There's like no shame, And I love that people actually schedule it in to their calendar, like 30 minutes. They'll go in there, maybe they'll meditate. Because you're right, some people might have trouble taking a full-on nap. But I read somewhere that even just, closing your eyes and having steady breathing, that can also have some similar benefits as taking a nap.
I mean, that's amazing that there's actually sort of dedicated space and it's kind of promoted in the Bay Area for naps. I mean, I do work in healthcare, so I can't really speak to sort of the corporate aspect of the East Coast, but it's certainly naps are certainly not built into my schedule. I'll say that. And I don't know if it ever was as a resident or fellow or even now as an attending, but I do think that it can be productive. And the problem, I can see why it can be hard to adopt on a large scale because naps may not have the same effect on everyone, right? Some people who are able to kind of be strategic nappers and actually, like as you mentioned, Ying, sort of time their naps and trying to optimize their sleep as they do so, even in their nocturnal sleep, can really do so in their benefit. But if it goes over, a certain time period or taken in the wrong time of the day, it can actually have opposite side effects. So
yeah, because how many times have you like I know this has happened to me. I love to hear if this happens to you. But how many times have you guys like, start working on your laptop, it's 2 or 3 p.m. and you start getting tired. You almost feel like you want to sleep, but you can't because you're working or you feel like it's weird. Like how nice would it be able to be like, you know what? I'm not being productive right now anyway. My eyes are closing anyway. I'm going to go get up, take a quick nap, and then once I feel great, I'm going to come back and then like tackle this again with a fresher mind. So to me, I feel like that mindset might be really great to adopt. But you're right, in this modern day, it might be tricky to do it for everybody.
I think maybe what you're even alluding to is kind of removing the guilt from taking a nap. I think that, definitely there are times where I feel really tired, especially if I've had a long sort of work day or sort of, late night the night before, and I do want to take a nap, but there is a certain guilt around it as it's not sort of incorporated naturally
Like
into
you see someone go get coffee 6 times a day, like that doesn't have any like, guiltiness to it, but you see someone take a
right.
30-minute nap and suddenly you're like, "Oh my God, what is he doing?" It's a little funny that way.
I feel like I operate that way. Like if I'm feeling sleepy, I'll definitely take a nap because I'm not much of a coffee drinker to begin
Mhm.
with. Like I think I mentioned it in the all-nighters episode that I only drink coffee for the taste. Yeah, so I would much rather take a nap over drinking coffee.
And don't you feel like I feel like college students should especially have this opportunity to take naps because I feel like they're so sleep deprived all the time that if they can fit in a nap, maybe that's really good for them. I don't know, but there might be a fine tuning to it as well.
Well, I guess it's good for a college student at least because you get to schedule your own classes, like when you want to take your classes. So if you know that you're a type of person who gets sleepy around noon, 1 o'clock, then you can make sure not to take any classes during that time.
And that's the commonality, I think, between college students and people who work in a startup kind of culture because the idea was more like, as long as you get the work done, we're not going to tell you when you should come to work and when you should leave. We just expect that you will get it done in your own time. So when you have that thinking, people would be able to manage their own time and with more efficiency because everyone's so different. And I actually prefer that more. There's more freedom in it.
Yeah, and you know what? And going back to sort of the Spain siestas,
Yeah.
I think, lately what I've been reading is, and even when I visited Spain, kind of noticed this as well, is that people don't actually go to sleep during that time. Not everyone does take a nap during that time. So it's often used for other reasons, either as an in between of starting another job for people who have two-time jobs, or people who, to eat or spend time with family or catch up on different things. And what I've read is that a lot of people in Spain that now work in more industrialized jobs, their timing of their work has kind of shifted later. So they'll, to compensate for this afternoon siesta, so they'll go to work from 9 o'clock till 8 p.m. And so what ends up happening is that they are curtailing their time of sleep at night. So they're just not getting enough sleep at night. And so what happens is that because of insufficient sleep due to the night, they're having to then maybe take a partial nap or whatever during the next day. One thing to be mindful of, I think, when trying to incorporate a nap is that, it really doesn't substitute the nocturnal sleep where you have all stages of sleep that you have. And so people who do take longer naps, research has shown that they may not be getting that deep sleep throughout the night and have more awakenings. I know that for me, when I do sometimes take, an hour nap in the weekend, if I'm especially tired, it's not as easy to have a consolidated night of sleep that night.
Oh, there was one more thing that I thought was interesting, but they were saying how people who exercise more tend to also take more naps. I do find that when I work out in the morning, I do feel this lull in the afternoon where I feel like I want to rest a little bit, and it's kind of like a treat. Versus if I didn't do anything and was just, like pretty sluggish in the morning, then I don't feel like almost like I feel like there's no need to nap either. So that's an interesting mentality. Like, what if you were working so hard, you were so productive in the morning? Do you feel people feel less guilty or more kind of feeling like, oh, I should take a nap? 30-minute nap.
I feel like when I exercise more or when I'm more physically active that I've earned that nap. And I've also noticed that even on days where I do, like for instance, this weekend when we went hiking and also did a lot of outdoor activities, we ended up taking a nap in the middle of the day, and I still could go to sleep fine that night, like just because of the exercise, I think. Whereas normally, if I didn't do that amount of exercise, I certainly wouldn't be able to take a nap and have like a full night of sleep too.
It kind of makes me wonder if the exercise almost makes you more relaxed. Like maybe you're able to release so much of the stress or whatever that's pent up inside. Because the reason why people have trouble maybe napping or falling asleep is because they're too like wound up or stressed, or they have too much going on in their mind. And I find exercise releases serotonin and like dopamine. And we were talking previously about how, the happy hormones. And I was talking about how like that actually might help promote sleep for people. So
It
maybe
does.
that's related, maybe.
Well, yes, I think definitely by the mechanisms which you said, it definitely promotes sleep by increasing serotonin and those good hormones. Another way that it increases sleep is that it actually builds up the amount of adenosine in your brains that promote sleep too. So the more you exercise, the more adenosine you produce, and the sleepier you get, and your sleep drive goes up. So I know that if I don't get an X amount of exercise a day, it is definitely harder for me to fall asleep at the same time that night than on a day where I would get more exercise.
And I love that you guys, after taking a hike, because it's probably really hot too. And I don't know if you got you guys, but we're experiencing a heat wave here. So when it's hotter outside too, like I definitely don't want to go outside or do anything. So I can imagine, I can understand people who have siestas, like even in the Philippines and other places maybe that's hotter. It's probably normal for them to take a nap and like escape from the heat, right? Especially if there's nothing to do outside or
Yeah.
not able to go outside.
I feel like nowadays we're just so locked up inside, literally and figuratively, but it's a natural mechanism of the body to want to conserve energy when it's so hot and you're really losing a lot of water and electrolytes when you're sweating. So I think that makes sense. Must have
Maybe
gotten.
it's also the comfort of warmth
Ooh.
that that makes you feel sleepy. I don't know. Just a guess.
Yeah, but I do feel like altering your body temperature does affect your sleep because if it's too
Yeah,
hot,
actually, it's
I can't
it's
sleep
the
either.
so like your body wants to go to sleep at night. The trigger for going to sleep at night is when your body temperature drops, and then the trigger to wake up in the morning is when your body temperature rises. So it's kind of the opposite. I think
'Cause-
the
yeah.
mechanism of sleep in the day is a little bit different, and just it's like the survival mechanism where your body tries to conserve energy, and you're feeling like fatigued, and because of
Mm.
those inflammatory markers and that fatigue is why you go to sleep.
That makes sense because one of the natural tips I read about how to go to sleep is to take a hot shower because that would raise your body temperature, and then when you get out and by the time you're like, ready for bed, it cools down. So then you
Exactly.
feel like, ah, I'm ready for bed.
Yeah.
That's so smart.
Hmm.
That drop in temperature is really important
Drop.
for sleep at night, which is great.
That kind of reminds, just going back to what we were talking about with how maybe taking a longer nap could be detrimental and promote grogginess and affect our nighttime sleep in turn, which is very important to maintain. Some people may turn to melatonin as a quick fix. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Nina, as a sleep medicine doctor.
Yeah, I think what you're alluding to is a really common, vast thing that's happening in the public where they're, advertising sugar bear gummies, where Instagram stars are as sort of like a sort of sleep aid. I'd like to say that, melatonin, when used in the right dose at the right time for the right individual, can be helpful. When you use melatonin properly, as advised by a sleep medicine physician, it can really work to your benefit in creating a good sleep routine. However, if melatonin is taken in the improper manner, at the improper dose, or at the wrong timing, it can actually cause worse sleep and what we call circadian misalignment, and really make you feel not rested by your sleep. So it can oftentimes do more harm than good if not taken in the right way. And we can talk more in detail about that next week's episode, solely dedicated to melatonin, the right way to use it, who it's for, and sort of debunk some myths about it too.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I love to. I'm looking forward to that episode. I remember back in the day before melatonin became kind of this trend, people would take like NyQuil or like sleep cold medicine to help them sleep because they just are so desperate to like feel, drowsy and sleepy. And we know how that's probably not the best idea because there's so many other things involved. when you take medication like that? Or, people who, drink wine before they sleep? Or have you guys heard of other things that people take to try to get themselves sleepy?
I think you've hit on a lot of the most common ones.
Yeah.
Definitely Benadryl, allergy medication, other type of allergy medications. I do hear, different type of foods people swear by. Warm milk, which does have a lot of, benefits to achieving sleep. It has tryptophan, which can promote sort of the production of melatonin and induce sleep that way. Definitely various type of teas, sleepy type teas that contain chamomile or lavender. And I've heard of, recently I heard of a strange supplement people take that they swear by that really helps them go to sleep, which is CoQ10, which is for heart health. And they swear by that for sleep. So there's all sorts of medications slash food products slash entities that people associate with sleep. And some of them have some good basis for why they could sort of promote sleep, but others I don't really have an explanation for at this point. But we can definitely talk more about that too, part of our melatonin and supplements.
Well, I just read something about how dietary supplements aren't regulated by the FDA. And so when they're created, there was a study that came out that said that on 31 different melatonin brands, that 71% of them incorrectly reported the dosage of melatonin. And it was like not even within 10% of what was reported in terms of dosage. So the fact that it's not regulated by the FDA seems very concerning.
Yes, Komal. One of the reasons why I think these sort of fads of taking sugar bear gummies or other sort of supplements that are just out there is that they may not really have the content of melatonin and the type of melatonin that is pharmaceutical grade or the type that you would use to help regulate your sleep cycles. And that's one of the biggest problem is that, there's so many compounds that are added into these supplements. So in my practice, I only recommend a very strict few, which I think we know have pharmaceutical grade and the correct amount and the best grade of melatonin in them. Melatonin is naturally made by your body. So that's another thing that people need to keep in mind is that everybody does produce melatonin. And so it's about listening to your body's cues about melatonin and how can we promote melatonin production in your own body too, which I think is also a great conversation we can have. And I always say this to my patients and even my own, I try to take my own advice about this too, which is that listen to your body. I think when your body is telling you that it's tired, that you're very sleepy, then don't try to ignore that. If possible, try not to ingest lots of caffeine to sort of offset that, because that tiredness is going to catch up later with you at some point. Once you recognize that your body's sleepy, make a positive association with that to maybe taking a really quick 20-minute power nap. I am sort of a proponent of that, as long as you sort of, and you can plan it, you can sort of listen to your body and think, well, I normally get sleepy around 1. That's sort of my time to be sleepy. Then maybe there is an opportunity where you can incorporate a quick 20-minute nap into your schedule, not as a substitute to your nocturnal sleep, but just think of it as like a boost to your alerting system.
A jumbo juice boost.
Yeah, exactly.
Nap boost.
Well, thanks for joining. I hope that you guys really enjoyed this conversation about naps and maybe restructure how you think about naps and what they mean to you, or maybe you start thinking about taking a nap or incorporate meditation into your day. And we hope that this was helpful, and stay tuned for more thoughtful conversation and discussion about the big topic of melatonin and whether you should be taking it or not taking it, or what it does to your body and how it's produced in your body. So stay tuned for that episode. But meanwhile, do subscribe to our channel and press the bell button to get more updates on our channels and videos, and definitely follow us on our great Instagram and other social media sites, including Facebook and Twitter. But until next week, we will see you on Sleep On It.
Sleep on it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone.